Okay, well, at the stroke of 7:02 p.m., I declare this meeting in order, and we'll start with a roll call.
All right. Belvedere. Benicia.
Here.
Concord. Contra Costa County. Puerto Madera. Danville.
Here.
El Cerrito. Fairfax.
Here.
Lafayette. Larkspur.
Here.
County of Marin.
Here.
Martinez. Moraga. County of Napa. Novato. Oakley.
Here.
Pinole.
Here.
Pittsburgh.
Here.
Pleasant Hill.
Here.
Richmond.
Here.
Ross.
Here.
San Anselmo.
Here.
San Pablo.
Here.
San Rafael. San Ramon.
Here.
Sausalito.
Here.
County of Solano.
Here.
Tiburon. Vallejo.
Here.
Walnut Creek.
Here.
Form established.
Okay, next item on the agenda, board announcements. Does anyone have an announcement? Any board member? I don't see any, so we'll move into public open time. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on an item that is not on our agenda tonight or is on the consent calendar agenda?
I see no raised hands, Chair Butt.
Okay, thank you. Next item, item 4, report from Chief Executive Officer.
All right, thanks very much. I have a few items this evening. First, I just wanted to extend a warm welcome to our alternates this evening. We have a few alternates with us. I know that some folks are actually starting to take vacations now, which is great to see. And so we have more than the usual on the alternate front. Thanks very much for joining to you all. And then next, I wanted to let folks know that today we received a complaint about some door-to-door activity that appears to be from a company called Green Wave Energy. We've been told that this company is going door-to-door in San Ramon and Vallejo, soliciting customers to sign up for their third-party gas service disguised as MCE employees. They're actually wearing MCE hats and shirts. So I just wanted to let folks know about that in case you see any activity like that in your community. Please let us know if you hear of anything. We got this information from a customer in San Ramon and a customer in Vallejo. We will be sending a cease and desist order immediately, and we'll also be filing a complaint at the CPUC and with the Better Business Bureau. So just wanted you all to be aware that that is happening. It has nothing to do with MCE. We do not offer gas service to customers in any shape or form. Next, I wanted to let folks know that the Mce Cares Credit COVID relief that your board approved several months ago has been of great interest to folks. We have already enrolled about 35% of the eligible customers. And this, in order to enroll in this program, folks have to respond to outreach that we're doing. So it does take some action, and we're really encouraged to see this level of participation. It's definitely exceeded our expectations. We also continue to circulate general information on ways to lower your energy bill. So we're hoping that that's helping as well. And we've been very active in the legislature around a arrearage management pool of funds that will help folks that are behind in their bills, and making sure that that will be available to our customers, which so far it looks like that is going to be available. So we're encouraged by that. And then next, I wanted to let folks know that the California Public Utilities Commission approved MCE's request for an additional $4 million in funding for our commercial energy efficiency program. And this was because we just saw really high demand in the program, and we filled our initial 1-year pipeline in the first 3 months of the year. So the additional funding will allow us to keep the program open through the end of the year when our next funding cycle begins. So continue to send folks our way. We're excited that this program has been really successful. And then next, I wanted to let folks know that our Flex Market program, which launched a couple of months ago, has had its first couple of opportunities to become active. This is a program that pays for load reductions during peak hours to support grid reliability and avoid peak energy prices. We thought we'd be needing this program mainly in August and September, but due to the hot weather, we've already started using this program. It officially launched on June 1st, and we called our first demand reduction event on June 16th and 17th during that first big heat wave that we saw. We already have over 200 customers participating, which is a lot more than we anticipated. Since that June heat wave, we've called 3 more events during some of these smaller heat waves. And the impacts of the participation will be calculated following the end of each month. So we don't have official results yet. We'll be able to give you that information probably at our next board meeting. We're excited to see the participation rates are very high. And just to give you a sense of the scale of it, the prices that we're seeing in the market on these peak days is extremely high. When we're buying power in the market on an average day, it could range from $30 to $40 a megawatt hour. The highest price we've seen so far in this year in the day ahead market was $518 per megawatt hour. So that's the scale of what we're seeing. And if we can pass that incentive along to customers, we can really have a big impact. So that's what we're doing. And then the last thing I wanted to update folks on is that MCE has coordinated a proposal to the California Energy Commission for a public-private partnership requesting $3 million in grant funds to support the development of what we're calling Richmond Green Hydrogen 1 as an extension of MCE Solar 1 at the Chevron refinery. We've received letters of support for this proposal from Senator Nancy Skinner and the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, and also our local workforce partner, Richmond Build. If we are accepted to move to the next stage, we will be notified next week. So we're hopeful that we'll be chosen to move to the next stage of application and be able to proceed on this pilot project. We also have several other renewable hydrogen pilot projects in the early vetting stages, and we'll keep you all posted on that. And the last thing I wanted to mention is that we've been working on developing plans for reopening, as many businesses and public agencies are right now. We do plan to have our office opened up officially on October 1. So we'll be getting things ready in time for our board retreat, which is scheduled for early October, and will allow for folks to choose if they would like to be in person for the board retreat. We will have that option. And we're starting to think about how we might want to structure our board meetings going forward. I've had some suggestions come in from board members where we might want to consider doing quarterly in-person board meetings and allow other meetings to be virtual. I've also heard from others that there's interest in going back to kind of a status quo where we were doing board meetings in both locations, Concord and San Rafael, with the opportunity for folks to be remote. And I've had some feedback that folks like it better to have their own screen rather than being remote in one of the 2 locations. Sometimes we did have challenges hearing folks in the big rooms where there were lots of people. So at this point, I'm interested in input from folks. Feel free to reach out to me individually if you have recommendations or thoughts, and we'll be thinking about it over the next couple of months. And no need to make a decision right away, but just wanted folks to know we're starting to give that some thought. And I see a hand up from Director Kohler.
Yeah, I have two questions. One is, what was with the $4 million, what's the total amount of our energy efficiency program this year?
Yeah, the average per year is about between 9 and 10 million. So that brings the total up pretty substantially.
Okay, great. And the second one is regarding board meetings. Since the governor, the ability for boards and such that are covered by the Brown Act to do virtual meetings is going away as of September 30th. And I know there's still an ability to do hybrids. How does our plans for board meetings that we're thinking about, I would think we would have to have in-person meetings with some ability for some virtual.
Exactly. And the way we would handle virtual participation is by listing the address of each board member on the agenda. So it takes an extra logistical hurdle that we haven't had during COVID. But going forward, if board members wanted to continue participating virtually, we would need to list their address on the agenda and know that, the week prior, because we'd be posting the agenda a week prior.
So you could be hosting residents in your home if you wanted to do it at home, correct?
By law, that would be, you would need to be open to allowing that if someone were to come to your residence. Certainly we would, I think the preference would be to encourage the public to go to one of our offices during a board meeting. But by law, posting your address does mean that someone could knock on the door and show up there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. Director Perkins.
In addition, you'd have to post the agenda 72 hours at your front door
Correct.
by law. So
Got it. Yeah,
another
we are
level of complication.
Absolutely, yeah. So we're looking at the governor's orders closely as that's one of the key factors that we'll be taking into consideration as we decide how to move forward. And the other thing I should mention is, I'm really interested in hearing what folks are doing, within their own cities and within your own businesses. Many of you have day jobs as well, and we're kind of looking for best practices both for our board meetings and also for staff participation. I think we're interested in allowing a little more flexibility for remote work going forward, since things have gone very well over the last year. But we know there will also be a need for in-person contact as well. So we're interested in learning from you all, getting any advice or best practices from your experience. And Director Kohler, I see your hand is up.
Just one thing. So I sit on the board of the Community Media Center of Marin, and cities are approaching us now. There is some equipment. For example, Fairfax is not looking at in-person meetings until September, but there is some equipment that they need to procure, you'll need to procure in order to do that. So if you're planning on continuing to work with CMCM, it'd be a good idea to start talking to them about that now.
That's a great suggestion. I'm sure we will want to continue working with them. That's what I expect, as we have in the past. So thank you.
Thank you.
And Director Budd, I think you're on mute. I think you're on mute.
I muted myself. I'm sorry. I don't know how that happens.
Now we can hear you.
Yeah. Any other questions for Dawn? Okay, well, let's move to the next item, item 5, the consent calendar. We have 5 items on it tonight. Does anybody want to remove any of the items from the consent calendar? I don't see any requests. So at this time, I would entertain Director
I'll move
Wagon Connect.
Public comment.
I'm going to, well, the public comment on the consent calendar is we've already had public open time for that.
They're different.
Well, the public open time that we already had is an opportunity to speak about anything either not on the agenda or on the consent calendar. So if there's somebody from the public out there who wants to speak on a consent calendar item, raise your hand and we'll certainly give you an opportunity. I don't see anybody. Director Wagon Connect.
I would move the consent calendar.
Okay, we have a motion
I
from.
second.
Okay, the second, I heard 2 seconds yelled out.
Oh my God.
Okay, Green. So motion by Wagon Connect, second by Green. Let's call the roll, please, on the consent calendar.
And Darlene,
Belvedere.
yeah, you're with us.
Belvedere. Benicia,
Yes.
Concord, Contra Costa County, Corte Madera, Danville,
Yes.
El Cerrito,
Yes.
Fairfax,
Yes.
Lafayette,
Yes.
Larkspur,
Yes.
County of Marin,
Yes.
Martinez, Moraga, County of Napa, and all 5 Napa cities,
I'm here and yes.
Novato, Oakley,
Yes.
Pinole,
Yes.
Pittsburgh,
Yes.
Pleasant Hill,
Yes.
Richmond,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
San Anselmo,
Yes.
San Pablo,
Yes.
San Rafael, San Ramon,
Yes.
Sausalito,
Yes.
Solano County,
Yes.
Tiburon, Vallejo,
Yes.
Walnut Creek.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, the next item 6, is the first action item on our agenda tonight. Proposed resolution 2021-05, authorizing the execution and delivery of a clean energy purchase contract and certain other documents in connection with the issuance of the California Community Choice Financing Authority Clean Energy Project Revenue Bond Series 2021A, and certain other actions required to ensure the reduction in the costs of renewable energy therewith.
Great, and we're
So-
going to hear from Garth Salisbury, who is our Director of Finance.
Thank you, Dawn. So good evening, members of the Board of Directors. Before we get started on this agenda item, I'd like to recognize some of the internal external members of the working group for this proposed prepayment transaction. They're here tonight to answer any questions you may have. So first, from the internal team, Mce Saxby, Director of Power Resources, is here to answer any questions about the PPAs related to the solar projects that we anticipate putting in the prepayment transaction. Mike Callahan, Senior Policy Counsel, is here today to answer questions about the internal legal items and items related to PCC1 aspects of the financing. And from our external deal team, Doug Bird, a partner at Chapman and Cutler, is attending, and Doug is acting as MCE's Renewable Prepayment Counsel and also as MCE's Disclosure Counsel. John Norman is here, and John is a Managing Director with Municipal Capital Markets Group out of Denver, and they're our financial advisor on the transaction. Steve Hall is here. Steve is MCE's longtime contracts counsel and is working with us with the PPAs that we'll be assigning for this prepayment. Jim Tracy is also here, I believe, and Jim is a financial consultant to MCE and in particular helps us with board items related to finance. And then last but not least, Devin Brennan is here. Devin is a partner with Orr, Carrington and Sutcliffe, and they are bond and tax counsel on the proposed transaction. So there was a very detailed staff report in the board packet and a number of documents that we'll all spend a little time to go over at a very high level. But to summarize this proposed prepayment transaction, these are existing contracts for renewable energy that MCE has already executed, and we're already receiving energy from these projects. The prepayment transaction will reduce the cost of that energy through the prepayment by a minimum of 10% on an annualized basis, and perhaps more depending upon where the market is and when we actually do the transactions. And finally, the bonds issued to fund the prepayment are not MCE's debt, and MCE is not responsible to repay the debt. And if anything happens that would cause this transaction to unwind, MCE would simply receive our contracts back and we would continue paying for the energy at the original contract price. So that's really the financial risk in this transaction for MCE, that for some reason the transaction comes down or is unwound, that we end up going back to our original contracts. So up on the screen right now is a PowerPoint presentation about this. Can we move to the next page, please? So a bit of a timeline. Staff has been working on this transaction really since sort of late in 2019, but in February of 2020, we brought to the technical committee the concept of a prepayment transaction, described it, and the technical committee was very positive about looking further into the concept. At the May 2020 board meeting, board directed staff to secure the necessary consultants to be able to go out and complete the transaction. We came back to the full board in March, at which time we updated on the prepayment transaction and our progress to date. And then in April, board directed staff to finalize negotiations and to bring back a prepayment transaction for a vote. This resolution and these documents were reviewed by the executive committee earlier this month. And so at that executive committee meeting on July, I believe it was July 2nd, actually, the executive committee voted unanimously to recommend to the full board approval of resolution 2020-05, authorizing staff to enter into a prepayment transaction under certain parameters. And then here tonight, we're putting before the board for consideration a vote on resolution 2021-05. Next slide. We did also want to update the board as well that staff, along with some of our consultants, have gone to the CPUC to describe this transaction. In particular, we wanted to make sure that they understood that this renewable energy, this PCC1 energy, nothing really changes with that insofar as MCE is contracted for it. MCE will be receiving it and providing it to our end use customers. Next slide. So we did want to give the board an update in the status of the market conditions. So really in the last 3 months, 5 of these prepayment transactions have closed, totaling over $3 billion. At MCE's transaction in particular, would have produced about 9.5 savings back on Tuesday, June 22nd. But also on Tuesday of this week, just 2 days ago, we were also right around that same level, about 9.5% savings. So the transaction is extremely market sensitive, and the ability to hit that savings target can be very, very temporary. It may last for a day or two. So again, that's really the reason that we're looking for authorization to go and execute, because we're going to need that to be able to do so on very short notice. Next, the board has approved MCE joining the California Community Choice Financing Authority, and this will be the issuing entity for the prepayment bonds. We have this JPA has been formed, and we had the first board meeting on June 25th. So this entity is up and running and ready to go to be just the issuer of the bonds as a conduit. So staff is now providing the board with the documents that we must enter into to initiate the transaction, and recommending that the board provide the authority to execute the documents and to complete the proposed transaction if certain parameters are met. So we want to talk about what those parameters are. Next slide. So within this resolution, there are parameters. So it directs staff to complete the negotiations on the prepayment transaction and to finalize and execute the necessary documents under and only if certain parameters are met. And these parameters are that the bonds will not be obligations of MCE, that the par amount of the bonds will not exceed $900 million, and the discount on the prepaid energy will be at least 10%. And I do want to point out that I believe the board was provided with an amended resolution. As we looked at that resolution, there was language in there that was effectively requiring that the savings be 10% every month. And that probably wouldn't happen. And so because of the variability of the energy that comes from these projects, we have had to slightly change the language in that resolution to reflect the fact that those savings would be realized over the course of the entire year, and each and every year that the transaction is outstanding. So just wanted to make sure we pointed that out. And then finally, the total cost of issuance for the transaction, the issuance costs, will not exceed 0.8% or less than 1% of the proceeds of the bond issue. The resolution also approves the forms of the transaction documents. Again, they were in the packet. And it directs the staff to make the necessary payments to the consultants and the underwriters from the bond proceeds of the issue. Next slide. So a quick kind of document summary. The Clean Energy Purchase Contract is between MCE and CCCFA, the conduit issuer, and is the actual energy that is being assigned and comes through the issuing entity. The limited assignment agreements are where we assign the existing PPAs to the prepaid supplier, and just certain aspects of them. We will continue to operate directly with the what we call them the PPA sellers or the projects in terms of scheduling and all the things we normally do in billing. But we have assigned it from a financial standpoint to the prepaid supplier. There's an operational service agreement that goes through all of the protocols on billing and so on, and effectively keeps MCE and the PPA sellers, the projects, doing the same things we have done historically. There's a custodial agreement between MCE, J. Aaron, and U.S. Bank as custodian to track all the funds and the payments. There was also an Appendix A from the preliminary official statement. This describes MCE as the purchaser of the prepaid renewable energy in the proposed transaction. And importantly, we're in the appendix because once again, we are not the credit behind this transaction. And that's what we do have to disclose to the potential bondholders, that MCE is the off-taker of the energy. And then finally, the proposed resolution 2021-05, which gives staff the authority to complete the negotiations on the prepayment transaction, to finalize and execute the necessary documents and contracts, to complete the proposed energy prepayment transaction, and to realize the savings. Next slide. So the fiscal impacts. Savings of about $2.5 to $3 million or more per year on the cost of the energy, on the prepaid amounts of the energy from the contracts. And again, that's what we've been working towards for this time. Right now, we are looking at assigning 3 to possibly 4 contracts into this prepayment. And the amount that's prepaid from those contracts, we expect we will, if we do the transaction, earn 10% or more, expected to be somewhere from $2.5 to $3 million or more each year. So the recommendation, we're requesting the board approve resolution 2021-05, authorizing staff to finalize negotiation, execute all necessary contracts, documents and certificates required to close the proposed transaction, and direct payments from bond proceeds.
Okay, thank you for that presentation. Are there questions from board members? Director Haroff?
Let me make sure I'm unmuted here.
Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, good. I am unmuted. I just wanted to thank Garth for and MC staff and our consultants in general for all the hard work that they put into this process. I think this is a really terrific development for the organization overall. Virtually everything that Garth went over was fully vetted before the executive committee. And I think we're enthusiastically recommending the adoption of the resolution tonight. There was that one clarification about that 10%, and I appreciate that, Garth. And I think that was appropriate because that's not something I think we caught necessarily in the conversation at the executive committee. So that was a good catch. But I just wanted to reassure folks that that we did take a hard look at what is being proposed here at the executive committee level. And as I said, I think we have, I think you said we had unanimous endorsement of this proposal. So that's all I wanted to say.
Okay, other board members have questions? Director Wagon Connect.
Thank you. One of the one thing I would like to see added into this.
We're having a hard time hearing you.
Let's see. Am I okay? You can't hear me? Can you hear
A
me
little
now?
better.
Is it possible to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The one thing that I would like is a post-game checkup, kind of an annual checkup to see how we're doing, at least the first year or two, just to make sure it's it's all we wanted. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's totally appropriate, and staff will absolutely come back and give a report to the board after the transaction is complete. And once it actually is complete, we'll come back to the board, update you, and then annually we'll give you an update as to how the transaction is going.
Okay, other questions from board members? I don't see any hands up. If you have a question, just shout it out. Okay, well, how about members of the public? Are there any members? Oh, I see Director Perkins. Go ahead.
I was just going to move the resolution 2021-05, but obviously that's premature.
Let's wait till we hear from the public.
Sure.
If there are any. Are there any members of the public who want to speak on this item? Raise your hand, please.
I see no raised hands, Chair Butt.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve from Director Perkins. Is there a second?
Tom, this is Kevin Haroff. I'd be happy to second that
Okay,
motion.
second from Haroff. Call the roll, please.
Belvedere, Benicia,
Yes.
Concord, Contra Costa County, Puerto Madera, Danville,
Yes.
El Cerrito,
Yes.
Fairfax,
Yes.
Lafayette,
Yes.
Larkspur,
Yes.
County of Marin,
Yes.
Martinez, Moraga, Napa County,
Yes.
Novato, Oakley,
Yes.
Pinole,
Yes.
Pittsburgh.
Yes.
Thank you. Pleasant Hill,
Yes.
Richmond,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
San Anselmo,
Yes.
San Pablo,
Yes.
San Rafael, San Ramon,
Yes.
Sausalito,
Yes.
Solano County,
Yes.
Tiburon, Vallejo,
Yes.
Walnut Creek.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay,
Thank you.
the next item, item 7, is our final action item tonight. Proposed fiscal year 2020-21 deposit to MCE's operating reserve fund.
We'll be hearing from Garth Salisbury again, our Director of Finance.
Thank you for promoting me, Don. Appreciate that. Good evening, members of the board. So one of the last things we have to do before we're able to complete our financial audit each year is to consider making a deposit into our operating reserve fund. So in November of 2019, the board approved Resolution 2019-06, creating the operating reserve fund. Now, the operating reserve fund is not just a regular cash reserve or something. This is a fund where we're able to defer revenue from one fiscal year to be used for a future fiscal year. Okay, so this is important. It's done so under certain accounting rules, and also important to realize we have the cash that we've earned in a given fiscal year, but we're not going to, if we make a deposit to this operating reserve fund, we're not going to realize the revenue for the purposes, for accounting purposes. Again, we have the cash, we're not going to realize the revenue. And that will allow us, if we have a skinnier year in the future or under some financial stress, we'll be able to realize these revenues to satisfy any financial covenants we might have at that time or so on. So it is a really prudent thing to do fiscally. We have set this fund up. Last fiscal year, we put $10.5 million in it. And so staff is proposing that we make a deposit into it again for the most recent fiscal year, which ended March 31. So in addition, board requested that staff develop a policy around this fund. And so in November of 2020, the board adopted the operating reserve fund policy. And this policy describes the situations in which, when we consider putting money into the fund, and the situations in which when we could withdraw money from the fund or revenues from the fund. So the first criteria is that our net revenues for the year in which we intend to defer are at least 5% of our total operating and non-operating revenues for the fiscal year. The other criteria is that we have a targeted balance. And so we're allowed to request a deposit of revenues into the fund once up to the point where that fund equals about 10% of our total operating and non-operating revenues. So for fiscal year 2020 and 21, we have, as I said, the audit pretty much done. And we are anticipated to produce $32,045,000 to our net position. And this represents 7.1% of our total revenues. So we're over that 5% threshold. So staff is recommending that we deposit $4.5 million into the operating reserve fund for fiscal 2020-21. And this would reduce the addition to our net position from 32 to $27,545,000. And it would result in total deferred revenue into the operating reserve fund of $15 million even. So, so if the board approves the recommended transfer, the current ORF balance would be about 3.3% of the operating revenue, so well below the goal of 10%, but still we're making progress on reaching that goal. So the fiscal impacts are a deferral of $4.5 million will reduce our net revenues by the same amount, and the same amount reduction in the addition to net position would be $27,545,000 for fiscal 2021. So the staff recommendation is that the board consider approval of a deferral of $4.5 million into the operating reserve fund.
Thank you, Garth. Are there questions from board members? I don't see any hands up. If I miss somebody, go ahead and speak up. But I don't see any. Are there members of the public who wish to speak? Raise your hand, please. Be recognized.
I see no raised hands, Chair Butt.
Okay, so let's do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve the deferral of $44,500,000 into the operating reserve fund for fiscal year 2021.
Okay, motion by Kohler. Is there a second?
I'll second it. This is Katie Meisner.
Okay, second by Meisner. Let's call the roll, please.
Belvedere. Benicia.
Yes.
Concord. Contra Costa County. Puerto Madera. Danville.
Yes.
El Cerrito.
Yes.
Fairfax.
Yes.
Lafayette. Yes. Larkspur,
Yes.
County of Marin,
Yes.
Martinez, Moraga, Napa County,
I think this is great, so yes.
Novato, Oakley,
Yes.
Pinole,
Yes.
Pittsburgh,
Yes.
Pleasant Hill,
Yes.
Richmond,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
San Anselmo,
Yes.
San Pablo,
Yes.
San Rafael, San Ramon,
Yes.
Sausalito,
Yes.
County of Solano,
Yes.
Tiburon, Vallejo,
Yes.
Walnut Creek.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you.
The next item, item 8, is a discussion item, Mce Cares Campaign.
Great. And we're going to hear from Melissa Giles, who is with our Public Affairs Department.
Thank you, Dawn. So we're really excited to be sharing the Mce Cares creative campaign with everyone. This is going to be the brand awareness phase of the campaign that just launched into market last week. As you recall, we launched our Mce Cares credit, giving eligible customers who were in need that credit or discount on their bill starting in April with direct mail and mailing campaigns. So this next portion of the campaign is a general awareness phase, as I mentioned before. And you'll start seeing that around market. So I'm going to go into the next slide and talk a little bit more about the campaign, which we shared previously to frame up the focus of it, the purpose, as well as the target audience, and then share with you the creative. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the campaign is dual purpose. It's one, to bring general awareness to MCE and the work that we're doing in our overall mission, but at the same time to highlight and share information about our income qualifying programs and those customers that might be in need of some of our cost savings and incentives that we offer. As far as the target, we're focusing on overall our service areas with a general market, but with a focus on multicultural and millennials. And we'll talk about that a little bit in the next few slides. Next slide, please. So the campaign is a two-pronged approach. As I mentioned, we have our general awareness ad campaign, which will focus on our overall service areas and really highlighting and focus on the millennial multicultural segments to bring brand awareness and a call to action to climate change and some of the initiatives that we have at MCE to help customers who might have been heavily impacted by COVID. And then we'll have direct components of the campaign that are going to target customers specifically that might be in need or might qualify for some of these programs with more direct approaches and channels to re-engage those customer segments. Next slide. So if you look across our 4 counties, you'll see that the majority of our counties are under the age of 49, with the largest segments being Millennial and Gen Z. And you'll also see with most of our counties, 3 of our 4 counties, they're increasingly diverse. And in the years to come, that's going to be more and more so as far as we increase in diverse populations around the counties. Next slide. So the reason we're focusing on Millennial, as I mentioned on the previous slide, is that they make up a big part of our service areas and our customer segments. They're heavily focused on, I would say they're heavily focused around climate activism, and kids and safety play a big factor into their considerations and decisions and a top priority. Majority of millennials are between 25 to 40 years old. So as you can imagine, they have families of their own, careers of their own, and they make a big portion of our customers who are paying for service, paying for their utility bills. Next slide, please. So the next few slides, we'll go over the different channels and the creative. You'll see that in the creative, we really wanted to capture be able to resonate with them and make sure that they see themselves in the campaign. Next slide.
Sorry, Melissa, there's quite a bit of distribution. We can't hear you very well. I don't know what's going on, but I just want to mention that.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me now?
I hear you fine. I think if anyone who's not speaking can go on mute, that should address the issue.
Okay, great. Next slide, please. So you'll see across the, these are 5 of the anchoring statements that really speak to MCE's mission and the CARES campaign with energy innovation, community power, climate justice, climate action, and clean energy. Some of you'll see across the 4 counties, bus shelter ads, bus sides, and billboards. Next slide. These are some of the digital banner ads. Because of the focus of the target audience that we're looking to engage with, there'll be a huge push on digital and social. So we'll have a combination of display ads, social media, and SEM campaign that we're running. Next slide, please. So as far as social media, you'll see that Instagram and Facebook will be utilizing the carousel as well as the the carousel and the Instagram stories. With that, you'll be able to learn a little bit more about MCE and our history and our mission, and there'll be a clear call to action at the end, which will drive folks to our landing page. Next slide. So this is this will be live on our site, but it will be a direct landing page from the campaign that people will be taken to. Customers will be given the opportunity to, if they want to opt up to Deep Green, if they've disenrolled from our service before, they'll be given the option to enroll back in, and there'll be more information where they can learn about our programs. Next slide. So these are some of the channels as we touched on some of the previous slides. So from a digital perspective, we'll have display, social, paid search, pre-roll video, over the top, and streaming radio. We'll have out of home with transit shelters, billboards, and buses. We're partnering with one of the top, well, the #1 top station from a ratings perspective in the market, KMEL. And with that radio station, we're also working with a radio personality, Sana G, as a local market influencer, and others will be confirmed. As far as print, we will have ads that have actually already ran in June in Marin IJ, East Bay Times, Benicia Herald, Vallejo Times, Napa Valley, and I cannot see the last one on the bottom, so I apologize about that. Next slide. And this will run, this is one of our 30-second ads that'll be running on some of those digital and social channels. So if you click on the actual image itself, it'll bring up the commercial. Oh, I have to go back to the last slide. There should be a link.
I don't actually see a link on this slide.
If you click on the image itself, it should pull up, yeah, it should pull up a YouTube link.
Yeah, we see the slide, but not the video.
Yeah, the link I saw when you put your cursor right over it, there it goes.
There we go. I don't think we're hearing the sound.
Is your sound connected?
Give me one moment. I'm sorry. I didn't realize we were doing the video.
No problem, Enya. Thank you. While we're getting that going, I just wanted to thank Melissa for the great overview. And you know, this has been in the works for many months, and it's really exciting to be sharing it with the board. I actually passed by my first bus ad just a couple of days ago, and it's exciting to see this starting to get out there already.
Solar calculator.
A decade ago, Californians started a climate action movement and launched MCE, the state's first community choice energy provider. The power of MCE is about more than renewable, clean energy. It's the power of people over profit. It's climate justice, energy innovations, and community power. The climate is in our hands. What action will you take? The future is now.
Wow, that was pretty good.
Nice. Okay, any questions from board members or comments?
I have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead, Director Ponce. Yeah.
I really like all the ads and yeah, really good, especially the target markets. But I wanted to know if these will only be in English or will they be in other languages?
The creative or the video we have right now is in English, but we will have specific targeted campaigns that'll directly target other languages with direct mail, print, and email.
Okay, but not the bus advertisements or the videos in other languages, only the mail?
Just the direct campaigns that we're doing will have the option of other languages.
Okay, thank you.
Director Murphy.
Yes. First of all, Melissa, I wanted to say.
I think.
You lost.
Unmute, please. You're muted. There you go.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry about that. First of all, Melissa, thank you and to your team. This is incredible work. I'm so happy that this.
You're muted again.
Good. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I feel like I'm not a millennial today because I continue to not know when the mute button is working and not. Melissa, I just wanted to say thank you to you and your team. This is absolutely phenomenal work. It is so great to know that I am part of the demographic because when I tell you I have been inundated with that commercial, I can't get away from it. I literally can't. So much so that when I turn off my computer, I fall into this like application online and find that this ad is continuing to come. So again, glad to know I'm part of that target demographic. Would just have one question for you in regards to just the target audience and some of the kind of outlets and platforms you all are looking to. I know you mentioned a little bit about multicultural millennials you're really trying to target. I was wondering about just the notion of just like, local news. I know it's, there's some folks who still read the newspaper, a lot of folks who don't. I'm wondering if you all have tapped in or considered tapping into some of the more, I would say, up and coming news and blog sites. I'm thinking Blavity, I'm thinking Me Too, like some of the more niche ethnic blog sites that have come into effect that some of the younger folks like myself read. Have you explored that? And then I didn't hear your last the speaker before me spoke about just bilingual. I was wondering, what are the languages the ads are going to come out outside of English?
So they will, as far as the other languages, just to answer the last question, we don't have direct ads, but as far as having the information available in those different languages, they'll be the primary languages, including Spanish, and I believe Mandarin is what will also be included. I think there's another one that I'm missing, so I do apologize about that, but I do have my team on the call. I think we have Nicole on that can speak to that if she's here. But as far as to answer your other question regarding some of the more niche sites, we have explored with Blavity as well as looking at potential opportunities later in the year. I've actually reached out to them about their Afrotech conference that happens, I believe, in the Bay Area. And then also looking at sites like Now This that have a large multicultural millennial and Gen Z audience. So we are exploring potential opportunities, not necessarily specifically with Mce Cares, but just in general with our ongoing marketing efforts year round.
Okay, and that's really great. And like I said, this is fantastic work. I just want you to know, like, I've had friends tell me, isn't this the board you're on? And again, in terms of like the target that you're doing, it's working. It's certainly working. I wanted to also ask regarding like some of the assets, the creative assets you have. We in Pinole, we have like local community television, Channel 26. I'm sure other cities have something to that effect. Is it possible to get the can you send directly some of these assets? I love to amplify them on either our websites. Obviously you're running ads. These would not be so much advertisements as much as, or excuse me, paid ad opportunities as much as they'd just be like on a scroll that we have in Pinole. Is it possible to get some of these assets directly sent to us as a board?
Yes, definitely. And if you have specific specs that you'd like those sent in, we can definitely tailor those so that you have them in the right specs.
Okay, wonderful. I will follow via email. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I just want to just kind of touch on specifically with the kind of multicultural millennial audiences and the younger segment, especially in the Latino community. Research has shown that they are truly bilingual. So definitely with this younger segment, they are consuming media and predominantly more, and I would say English language media. But we are targeting for some of those other segments that are more Spanish dominant or other language that are dominant, where we're focusing on print or those direct mailing campaigns. But I just wanted to highlight that specifically with the younger Latino community.
Director Kohler.
I think Director Barrett was before me, but just do we want to go to Director Barrett first, who was before me? Oh, I'll just make it quick. Just one thing I heard in the video, Melissa, and I think it's great, is you mentioned, and maybe I heard it wrong, that California started climate change a decade ago. Actually not. AB 32 was signed into law in 2006. And actually before that, in the 70s, the first Governor Brown administrations, he started the energy efficiency codes. So you may want to alter that a little bit. But another thing, just listening to Director Murphy, there are so many languages spoken in the Bay Area. I worked for Bay Area Air Quality Management District, and we translated into many more languages. And focusing on the multicultural audience, I think if there's a way to do even a broader reach, that would be really helpful. And even though I'm not a millennial for sure, I think a lot of young people read newspapers online. So the Bay Area News Group probably might be a way to do some online sort of focus if you're interested in that. Thank you very much. Great work.
Thank you.
Okay, Director White.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. I am just an alternate guest here, so I'll keep my comments relatively short. I just wanted to echo the sentiments of Director Murphy. I think that the creative was spot on. When I saw the visuals, I was there, but when I saw the video, I became activated. So I think you really have something there, and video is king. So if there's an opportunity for us to kind of build on that and put some more video content out along that same thing, I think we'll be on the right track. Thank you for all of your work.
Okay, any other board members have comments or questions? One thing I'll throw in here, some of you might have been at BCDC today, but we had a very interesting presentation on strategies for communication and public education on climate change and particularly sea level rise. And I will send the information on that agenda item to the staff here. And I suggest you contact BCDC staff and get whatever information they have. It seems like there's a lot in common about what they're trying to do and what you're trying to do. And there might be some good cross-pollination opportunities there. If there are no more board members who have questions, let's go to the public. Do we have any public speakers?
There are no raised hands, Chair Bud.
Okay, thank you. That was not an action item. The next item is item 9, legislative update.
Great, and we're going to hear from Stephanie Chen, who is our Senior Policy Counsel and has been handling all of our legislative work over the last couple of months. So I'll turn that over to you, Stephanie.
Great, thank you so much, Dawn, and good evening, directors. Next slide, please. So I'll be picking up something admittedly a lot less catchy than our last presentation. We're going to be providing a quick update on the status of bills MCE has supported this session, as well as an update on the state budget as it stands today. And then we'll wrap up with a discussion on implementation of SB 1383, which is a bill from 2016 regarding organic waste diversion. Next slide, please. So of the bills MCE supported this year, these 5 are still alive at this point in the session. They've all been voted out of their second House policy committees and they're headed into appropriations. And I'm especially pleased to note that AB 843, which MCE is co-sponsoring along with Pioneer Community Energy, passed out of Senate Energy Committee with no opposition, which is a really great landmark for us. This will be particularly relevant to our conversation a little bit later on about organic waste diversion. In the mix here too are AB 525 and SB 18, which would help California advance our explorations of offshore wind and green hydrogen, respectively, and AB 1395, which would establish a statewide goal of net zero GHG emissions by 2045. And then finally, SB 99 would provide support for cities and counties that are developing community energy resilience plans. Next slide, please. So these 6 bills did not make it out of their House of Origin, but because this is the first year of a 2-year session, their authors have the option of bringing their bills back next year for another try if they choose to do so. And here, I want to note that the Executive Committee had a quite robust discussion on SB 617, which was about solar permitting back in May. This bill would have established a schedule by which cities and counties would need to implement online solar permitting, and it was accompanied by a budget request to fund implementation grants to help local governments make this transition. So shortly after we met in May, the bill actually stalled in appropriations and it won't be progressing this year. But I am happy to report that the funding request for the implementation grants is still alive in the state budget process, and MCE has provided support for this funding request as well. So if it passes, that means it would provide financial support to facilitate a transition to online permitting, but without a mandate to make that transition, which we think would be a very positive outcome. Next slide, please. Now, as you may have seen last week, SB 612, which is CalCCA's PCIA reform bill, made it successfully out of the Senate, but it unfortunately wasn't granted a hearing in the Assembly Utilities Committee. Senator Portantino, our author and a real champion, worked pretty tirelessly to secure a special hearing, but the deadline for such a hearing was today, and unfortunately that effort was not successful. So now SB 612 becomes a 2-year bill, meaning that it too could come back next year if the author chooses to bring it back. And I just want to take the moment right now to reiterate our gratitude for all of you who secured your local support for 612, who sent in letters and made phone calls when things were really coming down to the wire with this bill. We put together a really impressive statewide coalition, including dozens of local jurisdictions, and we really demonstrated the broad reach of the CCA movement today across California. So CalCCA is continuing to advocate at the PUC for PCIA reform and will continue to explore legislative options to move the needle here as we head into next year. Next slide, please. So moving on now to the state budget. The top line budget was finalized last month, finalized a bit earlier this month, and the governor signed that main budget bill this week, which authorized general fund expenditures of just under $200 billion, thanks to higher than anticipated revenues and federal funding for the year. The details on many of these provisions are still being worked out through what's called budget trailer bills, which essentially just fill in some of the details that are missing in the big omnibus budget bill. And I just want to take a minute to highlight some of the few key line items that we've been following. First, just this afternoon, the legislature passed an human services omnibus bill that contains just under $1 billion for energy utility debt relief, and that will be available to both residential and commercial customers. These funds will be distributed by the Department of Community Services and Development, and they'll help address some of the debt that's owed to CCAs, as well as to IOUs and public utilities that has accumulated during the pandemic. And there's also a separate pot of money, another $1 billion, to address water debt as well. The budget also includes several clean energy investments, including $400 million for long duration storage, green hydrogen, and decarbonization for both the industrial and food production sectors. It also includes $525 million for EV rebates and another $500 million for EV charging infrastructure. There were also additional line items for medium and heavy duty vehicle electrification. We're definitely very excited about these investments, and we'll be watching these funds closely as they move into their implementation stages, as we anticipate that there will be quite a few opportunities here to advance MCE's goals among these investments. And before we switch gears and talk about SB 1383 implementation, I wanted to take a pause and see if there were any questions about the bills that we've talked about or about the budget.
Anybody have any questions? Board members? I don't see any. Should we ask if there are questions or comments from the public? Yeah.
Chair Budd.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Director Kelman.
Yeah, thank you, Darlene. Stephanie, thank you. This is really exciting and really very interesting. I'm wondering, to the topic of solar and being able to facilitate that, have you seen anything come through around DC microgrids or anything that would lend itself well to green building design and standards to help facilitate the deployment of widespread solar in commercial and office uses?
That is a good question. I am not aware of a specific bill that is addressing that issue, though I would say that there are several dozen bills that we have been keeping an eye on this session, and it is entirely possible that something like that just has not floated up to the top of our radar. But I would be happy to take a look into it and circle back to you. Thanks.
Other questions or comments from board members? Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on this item? Raise your hand, please.
There are no raised hands.
Okay, thank you. That takes us to our next item, item 10, heat-related. I'm sorry.
Actually, yeah, Director, but we have another part of this presentation.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think Stephanie was pausing for feedback, but yeah, we have a little more.
Thank you, Dawn. Let's roll phase 2.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry about that. Just wanted to check for any questions before we change topics. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Perfect. Thank you. So moving to SB 1383, this is an effort that may be top of mind for many of your jurisdictions as you're working towards your first implementation deadlines, which occur next year. SB 1383 passed in 2016, and its goal is to reduce short-lived climate pollutants like methane and black carbon by reducing the amount of organic waste in landfills. It has several key requirements, including organic waste collection, edible food recovery, and a requirement to procure a certain quantity of recycled organic waste products in proportion to a jurisdiction's population. Next slide, please. So to satisfy SB 1383's procurement requirements, a jurisdiction can purchase compost, mulch, renewable gas that can be used for transportation, electricity, or heating, and electricity produced from biomass conversion. These are the eligible procurement categories. Next slide, please. With respect to renewable gas, what is eligible to meet SB 1383 requirements is a pretty narrow subset of the kinds of renewable gas that are out there today, because it has to be created from organic waste that has been diverted from a landfill. A jurisdiction can either buy the renewable gas directly, or it can purchase electricity that's generated from that renewable gas, as long as it meets the landfill diversion requirement. And we've been talking with some of our partners that we work with on our landfill gas projects. And in having those conversations with those experts, it's our understanding that there are really only a few facilities in California today that would meet this requirement. And currently none of them are in MCE's service area. Next slide, please. With respect to the last procurement category, biomass conversion, there are two main eligibility criteria for what counts under 1383. The first has to do with the feedstock, and the second is where the feedstock comes from. So eligible feedstocks include agricultural crop waste, lawn and garden clippings, leaves and branches that come from forest management and tree and brush trimming, all varieties of wood waste, and non-recyclable wood, pulp, or paper materials. Next slide, please. the qualifying feedstock of the kinds that we saw on the last slide have to come from particular sources. They either have to come from compostable material handling facilities, from transfer and processing facilities, or from solid waste landfill diversion. So it's not just where what kind of feedstock we're talking about, it's where it comes from as well. Next slide, please. So with these requirements in mind, MCE has examined our current bioenergy portfolio, and unfortunately, none of the resources that we currently have under contract are 1383 compliant. We have one biomass facility with one biomass agreement with a facility that uses rice hulls, which would be an eligible feedstock, but the plant actually gets those hulls directly from the producer rather than from a landfill diversion effort, which renders that power ineligible for 1383 compliance. We also have 3 landfill gas agreements, but these are ineligible because the landfills contain inorganic as well as organic materials, and therefore they're not specifically organic waste diversion projects. Next slide, please. MCE is actively exploring our options for procuring more energy that is 1383 compliant so that we can help our local jurisdictions satisfy your procurement requirements. And AB 843, the bill that I mentioned earlier, is central to this effort because it will help MCE and other CCAs like us reduce the cost of procuring bioenergy, which is typically more expensive than other kinds of renewable energy. As I mentioned earlier, today there are no eligible renewable gas or biomass facilities in MCE's service area, but we are aware of 3 proposed facilities that are in various stages of consideration or development in Napa, Marin, and in Fairfield, which is scheduled to join MCE next year. So to this end, we would actually be very interested to know if your jurisdiction or your waste management district is considering bioenergy options as you begin to come into compliance with 1383 and start figuring out what to do with your diverted organic waste. Next slide, please. Now, we know that bioenergy can be a bit controversial among renewable energy options, primarily because there are some emissions that are associated with these technologies. However, there are a number of benefits that come along with bioenergy. These facilities can run 24/7, which allows them to fill in during those times of day when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing. And today, it's more likely that these gaps are filled in by burning natural gas. Bioenergy also makes productive use of organic waste material, which creates emissions even when it's not producing energy. In particular, bioenergy can produce electricity from agricultural waste that is often open burned in fields today, and from brush and other wood waste that we are removing from our forests as part of our wildfire mitigation and vegetation management efforts. And I want to note here that the Air Resources Board has estimated that the 2020 wildfires alone are estimated to have produced 112 million metric tons of CO2 in just that handful of months last year. This is more than 300 times the carbon saved by MCE's clean energy commitments over the lifetime of our agency. And that was all produced in just 1 year of catastrophic wildfires. So the opportunity to reduce emissions from wildfires by making more productive use of woody biomass from forest management holds some real promise, I think, in our fight against climate change. But because we know that bioenergy can be a somewhat complex proposition, MCE staff are working on a set of principles that we could use to help guide our decision-making around bioenergy procurement. These principles are still in development at this point, and we look forward to sharing them with you at a future meeting and hearing your feedback on them as they come together. Next slide, please. I think that's my last one. And of course, in the meantime, we're happy to answer any questions or hear any comments that you have on 1383 and bioenergy at this time.
Okay, questions from board members. Director Green.
It's not so much a question as a comment and a suggestion with respect to developing biomass principles. One of the criticisms of biomass is that it's indiscriminate in its sourcing, and that oftentimes entire chunks of forests are sacrificed for biomass energy producing purposes. So in terms of the development of principles, one of the things I think, or I would suggest be included, would be an exclusion of that type of sourcing.
Director Murphy.
Actually, over the months, as part of the Cal City's Environmental Quality Committee, have been doing a number of brain trust around how we execute action plans relating to building across, obviously, the state of California compliance with SB 1383. So seeing this presentation actually was a great linkage. I actually had never connected the two between MCE. I'd be interested to know a few questions. The first was in regards to kind of the procurement principles. Like what kind of plan do you see in terms of those being, what timeline do you see us kind of seeing those principles? And then also what type of connection do you see us as cities building with MCE as we develop action plans and strategic plans regarding this compliance?
Sure, I'm happy to get us started, and I would welcome Dawn or Vicken chiming in if you have other things to add. In terms of the principles, I think we are still working through those among staff and anticipate that they will be brushed up over the coming couple of months. And then in terms of partnerships, you know, I think local jurisdictions will be trying to find uses for all of the organic waste that is no longer going to be going into landfills. And so the opportunity to create energy that an entity like MCE can procure is very appealing for us. And then of course there's the opportunity to then sell that energy to participating jurisdictions to help you all meet your procurement mandates. So I think it really creates a nice sort of symbiotic cycle.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I would love to continue this conversation. I don't know how that would be best. Like I said, Cal Cities has created this number of kind of, they call them roundtables, which have been kind of, again, brain trust between different council members who are interested in this work. I would be very interested in how we can, particularly under the service centers you all have within MCE, kind of have this conversation in the grand scheme of us outlining these action plans for SB 1383 compliance. You may be familiar, and also, again, I heard you say something, this is very interesting. Thank you for answering all my questions via emails about some of your bills that we've been working on. But one of the things I've been looking at is the bill SB 619, which is a bill regarding SB 1383, but it's basically, its intent was to basically elongate the kind of compliance terms that we have across the state. Again, with so many things that I think there's just so many unanswered questions cities like mine have about where we start and where we end and what an action plan actually looks like. I think it would be so valuable to have these type of conversations, particularly in this kind of setting of MCE and how you all approach the situation. It would super be valuable. So again, I just wanted to make that comment to say I'd love to work with anyone on this board, to be honest, but certainly with regards to you all's work and the services you provide to make our action plan in Pinole beneficial.
Director Meissner.
Thank you. So my folks might not realize my day job, I work for the Forest Service, the U.S. Forest Service, and I try to keep my night job and day job disconnected. But there is a biomass program that we have, and it's been really a challenge. I don't know all the details because it's not my program, but it's been a challenge to utilize biomass from the forest. And you know, the federal forest, they certainly don't want to have these wholesale, as Director Green has said, destruction of forests for biomass. But it's been a real challenge. You've probably heard of the bark beetle problems. We have blue stained wood, dying trees. And so there's a lot of dead wood out there. And I don't know how to make that connection from the biomass that sits in the forest to what we're discussing tonight. And if you've got any suggestions, I can reach out to people at the Forest Service and try to connect them to somebody at MCE. And if you want to just send me an email, I can do something later as well. Thanks.
Okay, Director Fong.
Yeah, and my impression, just from understanding 1383 is, and it's almost inconsistent with what we're trying to achieve here, is it's almost asking us to buy dirty energy in order to recover this threshold that the bill requires us to comply with. And if you don't do that, then they throw all kinds of punitives and penalties and stuff like that at you. On SB 619, which is a bill that's currently being circulated, I think the opportunity there is to delay this implementation of 1383, but also give MCE an opportunity to really take a look at these procurement principles and how do we continue as jurisdictions, work with you in order to align what we're trying to achieve, which is really to promote and advocate for use of clean energy. But it just seems ironic that this SB 1383 is actually asking you to buy dirty energy to meet this threshold of recovery threshold.
Any other questions or comments? I saw somebody's Director Darling.
Yeah. Katie Meisner reminded me, talking about your day job, I worked for a while with the Bay Area wastewater agencies, and they've been looking at reduction of biosolids application on land and looking at ways that they could use the biosolids to convert energy. And I think that's where some of the pyrolysis and gasification efforts that are going on are coming from. And so there's some partnership opportunities there. I'm assuming that when you spoke of the Fairfield one, Stephanie, that you were talking about Fairfield Sassoon. It's a new project that's coming online here sometime soon, once they get through environmental review. So there's opportunities there. I'll pass on some information on that too.
Director White.
Thank you, sir. Stephanie, just wanted to make you aware that Mount Diablo Resource Recovery in Pittsburgh has been purchasing new equipment and infrastructure upgrades to their existing anaerobic digesters for increased organic waste landfill diversion and biogas production. So you may already be aware of that, but that may be a potential partnership as well.
And Director Rice.
Yes, thank you. I just want to put in a pitch for one, laud MCE's commitment to trying to be part of this loop and sort of closed system, especially when it comes to the biomass piece. I know that MCE, I believe, has had some conversation with Marin Sanitary and then also with the Marin Wildfire Prevention Agency and Fire Safe Marin, which are really trying to sort of quantify what is being created, what the amount of biomass that's being generated annually through residential defensible space work, as well as the more organized land managers, vegetation treatment programs, towards actually kind of getting a sense of what's going to be in the pipeline going forward year after year after year. There's buildup, but there's going to be, and it's really critical that we deal with this biomass in a way that makes sense, because in the landfill, it's a methane generator no matter what. So what's the best application of this biomass, and then recognizing that those wildfires generate way more GHGs and particulate matter in a short time than controlled burns or managing the vegetation and in low intensity fires, et cetera. But anyway, I think it's really critical, and I think it makes sense for MCE to be involved in that loop for a host of reasons, but basically this is all linked. And I appreciate the work and look forward to hearing more.
Okay, anyone else?
Director Butt, if I may.
Did I see another hand up?
Yes.
Kelman.
Okay, yeah, Director Kelman.
Thank you. I just want to pick up on something that Director Fong mentioned. So today during our Finance Committee meeting, we actually spoke about a rate increase for our Bay Cities refuse service, and they actually referenced 1383. I'm sure you've all seen what R3 Consulting Group put together. If you haven't, I'm happy to share it with you, but they were retained to conduct the 2020 Zero Waste Feasibility Study update for the Marin County Hazardous and Solid Waste JPA for Zero Waste Marin. They acknowledge that recovery of organic waste from landfill waste streams is needed in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And that's all really wonderful and really great as an initiative. Unfortunately, it did also result in a huge rate increase for us, probably for other municipalities as well, as they have to achieve compliance both with CARB requirements and with these new requirements. So it's just something to be aware of. They are soliciting feedback. If anybody would like a copy, if you don't have a copy of the R3 report, I'm happy to share it. But there's other ways that this is going to be impacting us that may disincentivize us to move in a more positive direction. And I think it's just worth consideration.
Okay, any other hands up? Wave it, raise it. Okay, are there any members of the public who wish to speak on this item?
No raised hands.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to item 10, heat-related seasonal risks and MCE's response.
And we have a presentation that'll be brought up. Thank you.
Yeah, and while that's coming up, I just wanted to thank Director Birsan for suggesting that we talk about this this evening. We're actually doing a lot to prepare for the heat events of the summer. We've already experienced a few. And so we're going to hear a lot about our customer messaging. And then towards the end, we're going to hear a little bit about our procurement activities. I just want to also let the board know that we're doing a lot programmatically as well through our energy storage program and our Flex Market program that I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting. We're going to hear more about those activities in our September meeting. So more to come on this, but right now I'm really excited for the board to get to hear about what we're doing to help message customers and to address some of the procurement needs due to the seasonal impacts of the summer. So I'm going to turn it over to Leanne Hoadley, who's with our public affairs team.
Thank you, Dawn. Hello, directors. I'm happy to be part of the team supporting this overview of MCE's summer event preparedness, planning, and communications. You'll also hear from Justine Parmalee, our Manager of Administrative Services, Lindsay Saxby, Director of Power Resources, and Vikin Kasarjian, of course, our COO, as we cover this information. So next slide. Yeah, and we can go to the next slide as well. That's what we're going to cover. So I want to start by identifying the two types of events that are becoming synonymous with our summers and early fall. And these are, of course, our public safety power shutoff events, or PSPS events, and the California Independent System Operator, or CAISO Flex Alerts, which we experienced last weekend. Now, some of you may recognize the visual we're using here because we've used it in our blog posts, our Community Power Coalition presentations, and my team often references it in our community meetings. And most of you are familiar with these events, so I'll just briefly highlight that PSPS events are triggered when we have a convergence of heat, low humidity, strong winds, often those easterly winds that are warmer as opposed to those coming off the ocean. And we have a new trigger that was added just this summer, which is tree overhang or overstrike, and Justine is going to cover that further. But PSPS events mean customers who are in tier 2 and 3 fire zones or supplied by distribution lines going through those zones will most likely experience a power shutoff. And it'll happen for the duration of the fire threat and will remain shut off until the fire is improved, electric lines have been inspected by PG&E, and restoration activities have begun. So that's PSPS. Whereas CAISO Flex Alerts are triggered when we have consecutive high heat days, especially when it doesn't cool down at night. And we also experience unexpected generation limitations. So the CAISO Flex Alerts are a call for all Californians to reduce electricity use in order to avoid the need for power shutoffs. And thankfully, we've all done a pretty good job of heeding this request. And now one of the crucial roles MCE plays and CCAs play in CAISO Flex alerts is spreading the message of energy conservation. So you can go to the next slide.
Hi, good evening. So in preparation for PSPS season, MCE staff attend PG&E working group sessions, tabletop and full-scale exercises, and portal updates and training. During these sessions, MCE has the opportunity to ask questions, provide stakeholder input, and observe changes to the process for each year. In addition, we also attend the regional safety webinars, which are open to the general public, so that we are seeing what our customers are seeing.
And then starting in May, my team reached out to our city and county staff and PIO, or public information officers, key commercial customers, chambers, associations, community-based organizations, to confirm we had the right contact names, their preferred channels to receive our communications on energy emergency alerts. And then our internal teams work together to review our processes for when alert is issued, and even including our employee backup plan in case any of us are out of the office at the time of an alert. So next slide.
In the event of a PSPS watch, warning, or PSPS event, MCE staff starts analyzing customer lists and situation reports to inform decision making. We attend emergency operations centers calls to get the most up-to-date information, and we notify our internal teams to kick off a number of internal processes. Our team confirms our messaging and sends it to the board. In addition, we post a banner on the MCE homepage. And lastly, MCE will reshare PG&E social media posts. It's important to note here that we do not currently generate in-house social media content for PSPS events, as we want customers to receive that information directly from PG&E.
So as Justine goes over our PSPS event activities, and I cover really what our CAISO Flex Alert activities are. When we have a CAISO Flex Alert, we confirm the messaging. The board will get an update. Our website is updated, social media posts go out, and then my team gets emails out to our key city, county, community contacts really within a matter of minutes. Next slide.
Okay. And so in preparation for wildfire readiness, PG&E maintains and regularly updates their web resources to prepare for long outages. The URL is at the bottom of the screen there if you're interested in seeing what that page looks like. They are also offering rebates for backup power this year. I'd like to highlight that in 2020, MCE purchased 100 off-grid Yeti batteries and worked with local community leaders to deliver these to residents dependent on medical devices who could best benefit. Since those batteries are off-grid, this was purely an act of community care on MCE's part. We do not have plans for off-grid batteries in 2021. However, as Dawn mentioned earlier, we have some exciting things coming out with our energy storage program that you'll learn more about in our September update. Also in 2021, PG&E has improved a number of items. So they're installing 300 new weather stations, 135 new high definition cameras, 275 additional sectionalizing devices and transmission switches. 10 substations have been prepared for temporary generation, with 5 additional microgrids planned to be constructed by the end of the year. This year, PG&E has also proposed a new PSPS measure, which takes into account the risk of tree overstrike. So to reduce the risk of major wildfires, PG&E may turn off power on distribution lines where there are large amounts of trees tall enough to fall into electric lines during severe weather. About 5.3 million trees are actually tall enough to strike distribution lines in high fire threat districts. And some of these trees are outside of easements or rights of way where PG&E would have the opportunity to do their advanced vegetation management. Some of these are outside that area. PG&E expects events to be more frequent and of longer duration in 2021. I have an asterisk here because until PG&E added this new measure, we were actually looking to have fewer Psps events of shorter scope. With the new criteria, however, we do expect to see an increase in event count, duration, and size, likely concentrated in rural areas. Next slide, please. I'm going to go ahead and pass this slide over to Vicken to cover a few points about CAISO summer readiness.
Sure. Thank you, Justine, and hi, board. So the first bullet item, I need to go back to the creation of the ISO in 1998 with the approval of an open access system in the ISO markets where anybody in the West could compete for transmission capacity. And by doing that, ISO created a market that is uniquely situated that does not differentiate between its native load customers that they need service and anybody else that bid for transmission and acquired it. So in about a month ago, ISO started a very expedited stakeholder process that for any entity that uses the California grid, let's say a Pacific Northwest entity, let's say in Oregon or Washington, has a firm sale to, let's say, city of Phoenix. And for that firm sale, they purchase transmission across California ISO system that goes from north to south. When there is a one of these events, extreme system events, high loading times or weather conditions, ISO requested the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to have the authority to interrupt that transfer of power from the Pacific Northwest to Southwest or vice versa, just giving you an example. And to use that transmission capacity for local native load, native to California, and serve them when there is available generation asset. So this was a extremely heavy lift for the ISO to carry through. It is quite unique to have this kind of an authority or request this kind of an authority in an organized open market. The second point is, it's good to celebrate that we have almost 4,000 megawatts of new photovoltaic and storage systems that came online between June of last year and will by September of this year. But given the capacity shortage that we have in the system, it's still not enough. In case you are thinking about saying, why are we still probably going through these flex alerts and what have you, the need across California as we are shutting down or not renewing licenses for gas-fired generation, according to the latest PUC orders that we are following, combined capacity, it's about 3 times this amount. The other thing that the ISO, especially under the new CEO, they have embarked on quite heavily is to have a significantly improved coordination between all agencies. In addition to CEC and the PUC, all agencies they can touch and coordinate and educate what's going on. Next slide, please.
Great. So in addition to the web banners and social media posts that Justine had mentioned that we call during an actual event, the marketing communications team is also working on providing content that gives continual public education to our customers. So as part of this, we launched a Smart Energy Practices webpage on our website. That new webpage provides information about the significance of the 4 to 9 p.m. time period in terms of what sources are on the grid during that time, as well as it ties into the time of use rates and to the flex alerts, as CAISO is now moving towards calling those flex alerts during the 4 to 9 time period. The page also provides information about ways that customers can reduce their energy usage during an event, but it also provides them with information on ways that they can reduce their energy usage overall. So programs that they can participate in, specifically energy efficiency programs, and our energy storage program is highlighted on that page. And in addition, we've been creating some blog content and sharing those posts out on social media as well. And there's a few bullets here with some of the blog topics. I wanted to call attention specifically to the first one, which is what's the difference between a Psps event and a Flex Alert. What we found when we launched that blog post, I believe it was in the fall of last year, is that that post continues to get a lot of traffic from customers who are just Googling those types of search terms. And the interesting thing is that there's no seasonality really associated with that. That seems to indicate that customers are really hungry for this information. They're looking to educate themselves on the difference between Psps alerts, Flex Alerts, and other types of outages. They're looking to get tips on ways to prepare their homes in an event that they do have an outage. And they're looking for this information at all points of the year. It's not just during the months that we deem fire season months. So we're continuing to provide the content that they're seeking. Next slide, please. And here's the links after the meeting. If you're interested in looking up those pages, you're welcome to review them.
Right, next slide, please. Good evening, directors. I wanted to share a little bit about what Mce is doing to manage weather-related risk in the Power Resources team. Most of this is occurring on a daily basis, and it starts with load forecasting. So myself and a small group meet on a daily basis at 8:30 every morning to examine what our load forecast should be for the following day. Because modeling and forecasting is inherently an inaccurate process, we actually use 3 different load forecasting tools to give us as much information as we can at our fingertips to decide what our day ahead schedule should be. In addition to looking at those tools, we also discuss locational temperatures in Mce's service area, cloud cover that would impact our net energy metering resources, heat indexes and trends. So if heat is picking up or we're coming off of a heat wave, and of course energy or wind flows, that might impact the weather as well. In addition, during that process, we also look at what is happening with our supply and the resources that will be serving that load. There's a daily forecast that is generated for each resource for the following day, and we see how that then matches up with the load that we are anticipating for the day ahead. And when we can do that comparison, we can see what our potential exposure is to day ahead prices and real-time prices. In addition, we look at what are the market and grid conditions that may impact our exposure to market prices and weather conditions. So we will look at, if there's any congestion on the grid, and then of course trends in the day ahead and real-time prices. And take a look at how that will be reflected in our open position. To the extent that we have concern about being exposed to high prices during extreme weather events, your board approved a process in which we can execute agreements, short-term agreements verbally, which is how a lot of that energy is transacted with energy suppliers to fill open positions in those weather events. So that rounds out our presentation today, and any of the presenters here are welcome to take any questions that you have.
Questions or comments from board members? I saw a note that Director Murphy had his hand up. Is that still, are you still up? I don't see it. I don't see any board members have questions, or members of the public. Any hands up?
Director
Okay. Okay, thank you. So that brings us to our final item, board matters and staff matters. Are there
Chair
any?
Bud,
Yes,
I'm sorry. Director Haroff had his hand raised.
I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead.
No, just a quick question. That was a very interesting presentation, and I appreciate it very much, and I'm sure everyone else on the call does as well. Just one question about the change in the projections on the anticipated frequencies of PPS events. What caused that to be changed?
So in alignment with getting more in alignment with federal guidelines, PG&E proposed to the CPUC that they add a new tree overstrike measure. That measure is the new criteria that kind of shifted where PSPS events were going. So PG&E saw a lot of improvement with sectionalizing devices, a lot of improvement with adding backup power to substations. However, this new guidance is a little trickier for them. As I mentioned earlier, some of the trees are outside of PG&E's easements or rights of way, but are tall enough to fall on transmission lines. In those areas, if they are a high fire threat district, PG&E may be required to shut off power proactively. As far as the increase in duration, the numbers we are currently looking at, which are not final, but PG&E estimates that in Napa County, the average annual event count will go up by 1 or 2. The average event duration in Contra Costa County is expected to increase by 24% and in Napa by 13%. And the average event size in Contra Costa County is projected to increase by 108%.
Okay, well, thank you for that. It sounds like to some extent the change was the result of responding to better understanding the guidance, particularly guidance from the federal government. But what's still a little unclear to me is to what extent is it the result of changes just in assessments of data and making predictions about what the summer is going to look like?
Yeah, I personally am unclear on this one. I might pass this over to Vic and to see if you have any insights here.
Yeah, sure. Again, you give it a shot, Director Haroff. So, basically, I'm sorry, we don't have a visual, but when there is a transmission line down the hill on a right of way that is on an angle across the hills, especially Northern California, there are trees that are tall enough that if they drop from this outside of the PG&E's easement, they will take out the transmission line. So that type of variable was not in the previous PSPS calculations. And it added significant amount of, I guess, outage possibilities that Justine just shared.
Yeah, that's kind of scary to hear.
Yeah.
That partially answers the question. So it's not just a function of responding to changes in understanding about regulatory guidance. It's actually a change in the understanding about the underlying conditions that PG&E is facing. So that's very helpful, and as I said, a little bit scary. But part of my question also just had to do with whether it's driven by changes in forecasting about what climatic conditions are going to look like between now and the heart of the fire season when we get into like September and October.
Yeah, I don't think we have that kind of information, but all we're hearing that especially given the extreme drought conditions we have, that the possibilities are pretty bad. I mean, they're high.
Yeah, and I just want to get it. Thank you for that. That answers my question.
Sure.
Okay, other questions or comments from board members? maybe I've already asked, do we have members of the public who want to comment on this?
I see no hands raised.
Okay, that brings us to our final item, board matters and staff matters. Or Director Kohler?
Just one suggestion. I don't know if this is the right time, but I was on the website the other day and I noticed we don't have Google Translate on the website, and that provides something like 166 languages to translate to. So I think that might be an easy change to make in the future when you have time. Thank you.
Thanks. I can speak to that. So I believe that we do have Google Translate. It's in a rectangle at the lower left of our website. So it might have just been that it was down for whatever reason when you did visit the site, but it should be there.
Okay, I usually look for it at the top, so maybe that's why I missed it. Maybe I may be the only ignorant person, but it might be a good idea to put it near the top, because what you have near the top are something like a translate to Chinese. So I thought that was the only option. So maybe consider that just to help people like me who maybe need extra help. Thank you.
Sure thing. Thank you.
Other board members or staff have final items I want to put out here. I don't see anyone. Wave your hand wildly or just speak out. Okay, well, if there's nothing else to come up, I think we're ready to adjourn. Anybody have any anything before adjournment? Okay, well, at 8:53 p.m. we are adjourned. Thank you very much. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you all.
Good night,
Thank
everyone.
you. Good night.
Good night.